After that, I went on to The Outsider, which I gave a 3. Now, The Outsider is the first book in the Roswell High series, which is what the show Roswell and now the recent reboot, Roswell, New Mexico, I think is the title now, were based upon. And I was obsessed with that TV show when I was in middle school, and I read all of the books and I owned them, and I decided since they had a reboot, I would try them again because it's been years. Oh, sorry, you need a summary because you probably don't watch the CW. Essentially, one day after this tragedy, this local girl is saved by a boy with supernatural powers, and it turns out that he's an alien. And, you know, what hijinks is that going to cause? So on the pro side, I really like that this focuses on a, more nerdy, very, and genuinely so, intelligent girl, and that the lead male is a bit of a softie, and you don't see that a whole lot. Usually it's the mysterious bad boy side. So I appreciate the characterization, and there is an emphasis on friendship too, and family. So I like that. And it also does have a lot of glimpses at darker subject matter, like the foster care system. And so it has a lot of pieces like that. On the con side, while these characters are in high school, possibly because of a shift in what we expect of the genre these days, it does feel like it's for a much younger audience as far as the writing style goes, and some of the tropes, it can feel very generic and young at times. So even though I'm not into romance, that still did kind of degrade my experience. But it's also really fun because the reboot of the show, just as a side note, is really pulling from those darker elements of the book, like drug addiction, for example. And so my nostalgia factor is disappointed, but at the same time, I'm glad I'm trying to revisit this. And it's going to be really interesting to continue this and see just how much the show goes off and pulls from here and there. After that, I went for something quirky, and I went to Hitman Anders and the Meaning of It All. And this is also a very hard book to describe, in which a clerk of a place of ill repute disguised as a apartment building, a former priest, and a former robber or mob affiliate get involved in many schemes. This includes everything from, hey, we will, knock off people who are bad because they are bad and play the superhero, to a plot of church fraud, to Santa Claus. And I'm sorry if there's any spoilers in that, but it's so bizarre that the highlight of this book, which is my pro, is that it is very quirky and very humorous. And I think that as far as, a casual read goes, it doesn't matter what happens because it's really all in the dialogue and how they get in and out of these situations and all the bizarre. On the con side, this was a train wreck as far as pacing goes and storyline goes, and so it's really difficult to bump this up to where it could be. I'm going to leave it there. After that, I went to A Vision of Fire, which I gave 3.5, and this is the story of a clinical psychologist, I believe, and she gets dragged into the political world when a diplomat's daughter comes down with this mysterious illness, which ends up being supernatural in origin or alien, possibly, and her endeavor to find out what is going on. What I really, really love about this is that it addressed communication in a really unique way, not only in the very direct ways in that she has a son who is partially or mostly deaf. She's working with a diplomat who, you have that right there, but it also did it in subtle ways in the various elements of how she figures out the link between all of these mysterious goings on when a bunch of people from random places of the world start coming down with the same thing as this diplomat's daughter. And who have seemingly no other connection. On the con side, I'm not sure it was tied up very well. I think that it was kind of pulling its strings, but there are 2 more books in the series, so that might even it out. So for a freshman novel, which I believe this is, even though it's co-authored, interestingly enough, one of those authors is Gillian Anderson, who is from X-Files fame. So it was okay. I'm interested in seeing where it goes, but it wasn't the top sci-fi book of the year. After that, I did another nonfiction, and I read My Own Words, which profiles a little bit of the life and a little bit of the perspective of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is our wonderful Supreme Court Justice. My leanings are showing, but I think she is, after reading this, I gave it a 4. It really could be a little higher. She has experienced and lived through so much and has such, I think, a solid view on the world that I I can't even begin. If you don't know anything about her, just even Wikipedia. And I listened to this on audiobook, so on the Pro, I really got to, I think this is something that really benefits in an audiobook format because you do get to hear some of her direct speeches when it approaches that. It also laid out the criminal justice system, or rather the Supreme Court structure, even better than some of my textbooks have. So that was really great and made it really approachable. You don't need to be hard into law studies to appreciate this book. And honestly, I can't really think of a con. Maybe if you like a more narrative story, this isn't going to go for you. Maybe some of the reflections are a little long, but I think it's really worth the read. Totally different thing. I read The Wise Man's Fear, which is the second book in the King Killer Chronicles, and let me tell you, I am so happy that I did not come to this series until later on. I gave it a 4.5. I think on the pro side, this really builds upon itself. I think the character flaws that I found irritating in The Name of the Wind, even though if I might be unsettled by things, I see their purpose, they fit, they don't feel out of place, and that is awesome. I just really love so many aspects of this. I could make a whole video just on that one book. On the con side, the length is definitely going to get to some people, considering while this dealt with less time than the first book did, it dealt with more story. And so you're wondering how this series is ever going to reach current day, because it's primarily written in the past day of this historic, almost mythological man chronicling his childhood and what really happened to this guy who stopped by his inn. All I have to say, if you haven't experienced this, if you're into high fantasy, if you have a good attention span, if you appreciate something that really deals not only with a unique magic system and music, don't mind a protagonist that's a little full of themselves, check into this. I went to Mary Poppins, the first of the book series. I gave it a 4 because, unlike Little Women, it's a shorter novel, of course, but I think the episodic nature of these little stories was just completely charming. It was befitting. This is so enjoyable. You can see where some of the source material was incorporated into the first film. This may have been a reread because some of them sounded familiar, but I could have sworn it was one of the later books that I read when I was younger. On the con side, this is really hard for me because I think this is very nostalgic, and if you don't mind reading something of a lower grade, it's not going to be a problem for you. You're just going to enjoy it. It's a really fun ride. Maybe you're going to not agree with the way Mary is towards the kids and everyone around her, but I think, having a strong personality is not a flaw. So that. And to end the month, I wanted to spend my birthday listening to something that is awesome, and that's the last day of the month. So I turned to Every Heart a Doorway, which is a story, if you have not heard about it, about this girl who returns from another world and goes to a boarding school for these kids who have been ripped away to various fictional worlds of varying degrees of insanity or magicalism, pros and cons, happy and fluffy or dark and doom, and are really having trouble adjusting and really want to find their way back. Now, I think on Goodreads I have this as a 5. I probably would read it a 4.5 because, pro side, it has a really good range of characters. It has worlds and the characters themselves. It has a lot of great representation for the LGBT community. One of the first asexual characters I ever read, which was just great to hear about. On the con side, as a mystery, it it doesn't hold up as well. It's very loose. I remember doing that for my first read through, in that it didn't really work for me on that level. I I didn't really necessarily figure things out, but the pacing was so, and it eventually led me to like, okay, you might also be really happy with the end, although I think it was really befitting. If you're looking for just something short, quick, fun, this is a great place to start. It has 2 other novels. No, I think the third one, the fourth of the series just came out, and I have read the second, but not the third and the fourth, and I can't wait to get to those. So, if you're still with me, you're amazing. That's everything I read in January, and I hope that you have a great night. And I think we'll approach the other video when I have better audio and my voice isn't now dying. Toodles!